Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the co-artistic producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. And today I am joined by the incredible Ryan Borochovitz, one of our co-artistic producers. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing all right, Jill. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, actually. Thanks for asking. Today, we are unpacking and discussing the Canadian premiere of Heroes of the Fourth Turning by Will Arbery. It is a production happening right now with the Howland Company and Crow's Theatre, directed by the incredible Phil Akin, assisted directed by the astonishing Stephen Howe, and it consists of a 5 cast team that just helms the piece. There's a lot we're going to discuss. Of this piece deals with so many themes, and I think the chemistry was incredible. We'll get into each of those artists individually down the line, but before we dive too far in, let's start with our icebreaker, because I feel like we are going to need an icebreaker for this one. Ryan, what are you sipping on this morning?
We are recording this early in the morning, not the
Mm-hmm.
night that we saw the show. So I have hot coffee to, perk up my day, but I have
But
it in this Canadian Tire mug that has like the Toronto skyline because it is the Canadian Toronto premiere of this very American play. And watching this play made me very happy that I live in Canada. So happy to represent with this. How about you? What's in your cup?
amazing. Yes, I am also on the morning coffee train in just the cup. I thought, I'd fully immerse myself into what we're doing today. Vanilla hazelnut coffee with butter pecan creamer. Yeah, just all the things to perk us up. And I also have some water in my reusable water bottle, which Ruth, who plays Teresa, uses a reusable water bottle in the play. So I thought,
So
what the heck?
thematic.
We'll pepper it in. Great. Okay. So, as per usual, Ryan, I'm going to volley to you. Why don't you give a short synopsis of this piece for folks listening or
Yes, and
watching?
this will be the non-spoiler portion, and we
Yes.
will put up a spoiler shield before we get too specific. And who? How do you describe Heroes of the Fourth Turning
Break away.
concisely without spoilers? So this is a play. It's an American play from, I believe it premiered in 2019 and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2020. But this is making its Canadian debut. It's set in Wyoming in 2017, at immediately following the Unite the Right rally that happened in Charlottesville, that had very disastrous consequences and kind of revealed a lot of the I guess high players in the Republican Party in Trump's administration to be allied with literal Nazis carrying tiki torches and spewing hatred. So that's the context we're dealing with right here. And so we're set at a nearby, it's like a conservative Catholic college, I think is the proper term for this kind of institution. And we are following 4 characters who are all mostly former students but have some sort of affiliation with the school. And they're all they're no longer students, and they're kind of just reflecting. They're united here because they're one of their mothers, Dr. Presson, Gina Presson, has just been made president of the university. So they're having a bit of a celebration for her, and that brings them together. And our principal players are Justin, a mature student who used to be in the Marines and has some demons. We have Kevin, who's a silly little guy, and we'll get more into the specifics of all of them. We have Teresa, who is basically, big supporter of Steve Bannon and very confident in all of her conservative talking points. The way she writes for a website that's not stated to be Breitbart, but probably Breitbart. And then we have Emily, who is Dr. Presson's daughter, who we are told actually never went to the school, but she is still kind of connected to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And she has some kind of undisclosed disease that gives her chronic pain of some kind. And then eventually Dr. Presson shows up and is just this melting pot of ideas that, like, to get into the specifics of all the things they talk about religion, they talk about politics, they talk about their agreements, their disagreements, their understanding of the culture war, as it has often been called. And I think to sum up this play, like, any more specifically in its content is probably redundant. What I think this play is really trying to do is take an honest warts and all, but ultimately non-judgmental look at the kinds of conservative middle American people in our large theater metropolitan cities like New York or Chicago, where I believe this play might have premiered, would be easy to dismiss and just think like, oh, they all kind of think the same thing. They're all just racists or bigots. And these characters certainly are racists and bigots. Like, let's not give them a pass on that, but they're surprisingly intelligent, and this school that they've gone to teaches them equal parts poetry, philosophy, religion, but also outdoor wilderness survival skills and mountain climbing. And they quote poems at length in completely verbatim, and they spout philosophy, and they are a little more nuanced than I think the caricature portrait that a lot of people on the left would maybe apply to them, but in a way that also doesn't disregard or sidestep their views, isn't necessarily trying to make you sympathize with them or understand where their views are coming from, as much as it is just trying to show, as I think we discussed after, these people exist and they're more complicated than you might think. To say any more would probably get into spoilers. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or should we do general appraisals?
No, just I guess this was without spoiling because this is just present in the text what I'm about to say. But yeah, it does take place in a very small, secluded town in Wyoming, and the whole play happens on this outside porch.
Mm-hmm.
So characters exit and enter through a house, which is where they're doing this post-party celebration for the Dr. Preston, but it all happens on a porch, which we'll get into, like particularly how Crow Studio Theater, how that looked and such. But just to kind of really, I guess, paint the picture of it is intense, high chunks of intellectual text happening on a porch in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the wilderness. Yeah, I guess just to kind of add some texture there. But I think we can probably dive into spoilers now.
Okay. Do you
You
want to,
think?
before we do, should we give a general appraisal, just like for people
Oh
who
yeah,
don't want the
hello.
spoilers to
Yes, of course,
decide if
of
they want to
course.
see it?
So I guess just jumping off where I came from. Yeah, this run I also didn't mention at the top of the episode, but it was extended before it even opened. Extended to October 29th, and as it stands there are very little tickets left. Like most shows only have one or two remaining, and I think there's only a handful of days at the end of the extension already that have some tickets. So if you folks want to come see the show, absolutely jump on it. I would say see this show, absolutely. Kind of as Ryan was saying, this piece is, we talked about this, Ryan, too. It's kind of like an ideas a thinker piece. And I think like when you and I read the text just together, like off the page, that was kind of our consensus. And then going to see the show, I was expressing to you, oh, I love how we got to see bodies do this, because it really highlighted like how some of the characters, again, like I said, we're in such a tightly packed space. Like you really do get to observe, wow, that character has just been observing and absorbing this whole chunk of conversation. That's something you don't really get when you read it off the page. And as I said earlier in the introductions, this cast was so tight and kismet. Like watching people's reactions to the action is just wonderful subtext that you get to see lifted off the page that doesn't exist if you just read the show. So yeah, I think overall the cast, it masterfully brought this text to light. You and I also chatted, Ryan, too, about how this text is interesting for both of us. Like it's, I think even by seeing it, and this has nothing to do with the performances, but like the text doesn't help itself sometimes. Like I think there are these characters are seeded to be certain people, and then yeah, I just found in the writing, as the actor watching it, I kind of wanted some characters to maybe punch a little farther or say things a certain way, but the text is the text, right? So I think what the cast did with what they had was astonishing. So I don't know. Yeah, Brian, you talk now. I'm rambling.
Yeah, so like I also think, yes, you and I have both read this play before. In fact, we read it shortly after they announced that they were doing this, which was kind of pretty recent to when Assembly Theater and One for One Collective were doing Bone Cage at the time. And
Right.
I said in our review of Bone Cage that, oh, these two plays are kind of similar to each other. And similar to Bone Cage, I expressed this at that time too, that I don't really know how I feel about either of these plays. I have kind of mixed feelings. I think To me, I think the way I described it at the time when we read it is I think there's a lot of great stuff in this play, but I'm not yet sure then and now if it really does coalesce into a great play. I think it has all the trappings of a great play and can really sweep you up into feeling like, wow, that's so brilliant and remarkable, and I see what it's doing. But then you kind of like leave it and you're like, okay, but what exactly am I to take away
Mhm.
from this? And I don't know. I would say that watching it definitely, gives more of a sense than reading it. A lot is lost on the page, and this is an excellent performance that really does communicate it well. I was never bored for a second. I'll certainly say
No,
that
my gosh.
it's and this is like over 2 hours, no intermission. There really is just nowhere in this play you could put an intermission, and yeah, it is gripping from beginning to end, and very it makes your head spin sometimes, but it is a thoroughly entertaining piece, and
Mhm.
yeah, there's certainly value to putting these types of people under a microscope, understanding where they're coming from. I maybe have some misgivings about the way it handles a lot of this material that we'll maybe talk about more post spoiler. But I do think, yeah, if you are able to get some of the remaining tickets, this is a worthwhile play to see at least once. You maybe don't want to see it twice, but once is worth your time. And yeah, maybe we should get into the spoiler zone before we say more.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, right? I'm glad you brought Bone Cage, our Bone Cage conversation back into play here because I think with that play and with this play, there's something about it's almost like I don't know if this would necessarily be a new genre, but it's like uh, the idea of a very naturalist situation and conversation as like a starting piece for a play, but then peppering it with large swaths of either like in Bone Cage's instance, poetic text. And I would say like there is poetic text in Heroes as well, but more what takes the place of that is like large political knowledge and ideologies. And there is kind of like this honestly like dissonance of form happening for me that maybe that's why my like this takeaway not knowing what the takeaway is. I don't know that I just had that cooking in my brain of like that what yeah you're right like we're watching this, we're seeing these people say these things, and yet it's in like it's not like the theatrical way of going about it is very naturalist. It's I don't know, it's just like a
Mhm.
confusing mashup of what theater can do, right? Like if we look at theaters through like a political lens and we look at theater as like a creative lens, I find with both these pieces, like they're kind of mashing the two or trying to.
Mhm.
Obviously, probably Bone Cage more than Heroes in this situation, but like, yeah, it does leave the viewer and especially like a viewer in the industry really needing to kind of parse through their thoughts of
Mhm.
why was the piece that I just saw presented in this way, you know?
Mhm.
I don't know. That's just a little side note
Yeah.
flavor that was cooking in my brain. Okay, shall we get into the spoilers?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so right now, don't worry, you're not going to hear a loud sound, we promise. You are going to see a generator, a
Mm.
spoiler generator, but no need to cover your ears. It's fine. It's just the image
Mhm.
of a spoiler generator.
We're going to begin generating spoilers from this point on, possibly. Okay.
Okay, we're in. That was kind of cool. It was like a little micro spoiler of like, what's the generator?
Yeah,
And I
you
was
have
like,
to
don't
see
cover
the
your
show.
ears.
You have to
Yeah.
see the show to find out. And, it actually isn't the generator that you need to cover your ears about. We're spoiling.
Right.
We can say that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so, yeah,
Let's address the elephant generator in the room.
elephant.
What does the generator do in this piece,
So
Ryan?
there is this recurring motif, I guess you could say, throughout this piece that every so often this horrible, ear shattering noise just goes off. And the character of Justin, whose house and porch this is set at, says, "That's my generator. It's been making this awful noise. Hang on, I'll go tend to it." And all the characters like, "Ah, that crazy generator." And so this happens a few times throughout the show, usually at very specific moments being punctuated by this sound. And then at the very end, we are told by Justin that it's not my generator. I have absolutely no idea where the sound is coming from. And so it kind of maybe teeters into something supernatural, something demonic. hard to say exactly what is the origin of the sound. I kind of attribute it to something similar to the chord breaking sound in Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. That is a similar sound of unknown origin that may stops time in a way and makes the characters reflect on what does it mean. But
Mhm.
yeah, your guess is as good as mine what it does mean.
Yeah, well, I just even to indicate the times in which it does go off per se, it's when they have talked like very deeply about like a certain ideology or or certain aspect of Catholicism. I know, like you notice that kind of more again with seeing this piece versus reading it.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't always happen when those sort of cans are open, but that's it's kind of like right after a conversation of that nature happens, there's like a tiny beat and then the sound occurs.
Yeah, I
Sorry, were
like.
you going to say something, Toby?
I would just say yeah. Like I haven't. We read the text once, and now I've seen it once more. I'm sure if you were to do a specific close reading of the text
Mhm.
of the 3 or 4 instances where it happens, it probably there is a meaningful thread. I'm sure you could connect between them, and as I think you're starting to unpack here. But yeah, having not
Yeah.
done that labor, I wouldn't necessarily know specifically what that thread might entail. Hmm.
Yeah, but you're right. It does happen about 3 or 4 times. And, that's kind of mostly the amount of people we have on stage at one time in this
Hmm.
piece too, right? And there there's, conversations that we kind of had with some folks after the show of like, does it resemble kind of like the beginning of like a rapture? Or, like, is it like you just said, is it some sort of extraterrestrial sound that's happening or like paranormal sound that's starting to invade, these people's space. And it does have a very tinny futuristic sound to it. And we, like I said, we are in a secluded country-esque like part of the wilderness this entire piece. So it is auditorially quite a different tone to kind of what we are visually seeing. But yeah, again, it doesn't explicit. Everyone hears it though, and it does invade all of their ears and minds. It makes them feel uncomfortable
Yes,
and scared.
and I think we should give a shout out to the sound designer who had to
Yes.
read this in the text and decide what will that sound like. So
Yeah.
who designed the sound in this? I'm just looking here. Jacob Lynn is the sound designer. So
Yes.
excellent job, Jacob, for
Yeah.
bringing bringing that you if it was supposed to be otherworldly and hurt our ears and disrupt the
That was
action,
great.
you have succeeded.
Yeah.
speaking
Amazing.
speaking of shouting people out for their hard work, should we get into the cast?
Yes, you are right in the same frame of mind with me, my friend.
Okay.
Yeah, so I shall read off our illustrious cast. So we had the character of Justin, played by Mac Fife, the character of Teresa, played by Ruth Goodwin, Kevin, played by Cameron Laurie, Gina, played by Maria Ricosa, and Emily, played by Hallie Celine.
Mhm.
Those
So
are our cast.
yeah, I feel like we should. There's like not too many of them that we could probably give them each just like a little shout out.
Absolutely.
So yeah, who
Mhm.
do you want to start with? Who?
I'd like to start with Mac
Sure.
as our Justin. So this is the first character we see come on stage. And I just want to talk about like the way, I guess also we might get into costumes while doing this too. So our costume designer, Laura Del Chario, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. So Mac comes on as Justin and instantly I'm like, yep, these are the people we're dealing with. He has like jeans on, plaid vibes. He's got like, a mug that's like this brown, kind of looks like a mug that's been in your family for years. He's got his hair maybe looks like it hasn't been washed in a while. It's in like a tiny little half man bun action. And he's got like a leather belt on. It's just like the perfect archetype of like middle American man
Hmm.
coming
And a
out
real
on his
man's
back
man too.
veranda. Yeah, exactly. Then like back veranda or porch, breathing in this like country American air. And I really like Mac's performance as Justin, like that, what I just said, him carrying that throughout the piece was fantastic. Like he's kind of one of our characters of little words. Like no, he doesn't have as much to say as the others. But again, like I said earlier, it's everyone's reaction to the action. And there was such like a stoic sort of like breath. I don't want to say breath of fresh air, but like this character, if you looked at him throughout, he was there, like just present, soaking in, kind of on the exterior, but coming in when he needs. And I just, like I said, I think Mac Fife's performance really carried that through. And it was just like a lovely opposite to the other sort of spicy, feistier moments in this piece. And I kind of will talk about, I mean, obviously I can volley Mac to you as well, but I kind of want to talk about the men in this play. Like,
Sure.
so
Can
I might just talk about Cameron as well, but sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a simple thought about to add about Mac
Of
before we.
course, sure, sure,
That I
sure.
just I think the word that I feel like you're circling around with a lot of him that is there's a softness to his performance of this
Mhm.
like grizzled manly man character that like he has this like exterior image of like, oh, I'm the gruff guy, and he is capable of violence. We're told that he was in the Marines, he was a sharpshooter, he literally has a sidearm, a gun on his belt this entire show. We're introduced to him shooting a deer, and
Mhm.
so but then there is like a tenderness throughout his performance that the Grateful Acre little story is this perfect example from it. And I think this is a difficult character for an actor to really pin down how exactly to approach him. And I think he's someone who's very easy to think, oh, you're just a big softy, a cuddly teddy bear. But then there's the stark shifts, and Mac's performance, I think, was so inspiring because that never felt like, oh, where did that come from? Or
Yep.
it went with either the softness or the gruffness, that they both felt like
Mhm.
very unified parts of this character, and that one is always kind of in conflict or pushing down the other.
Yep.
Sorry, didn't mean to
No, no,
interrupt there.
no, that's great. But yes, I'm glad you brought up the firearm because that was kind of me leading into talking about Cam's performance as Kevin too. There's the large back half of the play is a conversation happening between Teresa and Gina, and Emily is sitting on the bench. So basically, the women are in this production central, like they're in the center of the stage. And you have the men flanking them, sort of as bookends, is kind of how I saw it.
Yeah.
And you had Mac as Justin leaning up against the house, and very visibly you see his firearm tethered to his downstage side. And then on the flip side of the stage, as the other bookend, you see Cam Laurie as Kevin sitting on a stump, and you can see the whiskey bottle of his sort of tucked in the back of his pocket. And I just want to talk about that image because I think that directorially are stunning, because you have these women, and I will say again, women talking about all of the things politically and conservative and supporting these like men in American politics that have said and done atrocious things, and to just have these women in support of it and unpacking all of that. And then you have, like I said, Hallie's performance of Emily sort of as observing this and just kind of being present in the conversation, not with these two sort of more tyrannical bulls of women. She kind of can't really get a word in edgewise if she wanted to. But you have the men just observing, but then having the image of a gun and the image of whiskey tethered to these male bodies also. I just saw it was like such an interesting image of like our white patriarchal society, like not even American, just like North America, anything, of like these women are unpacking, and having their voice, expressing themselves. It's beautiful in a very kind of, with the content they're saying, it personally demonic way. But then having these men flank them with these prop visuals and just listening. It just is like such an eerie, unsettling image that I think really fit the tone of this piece. Because I've always said, even just talking about like the system of, like Cam playing Kevin, like phenomenal growth of that, such a struggling character. Like from the very beginning, his character is on the road to get absolutely wasted and tries to kind of express his inner demons or express how he's feeling against how everyone else is feeling, and then just like vomits on top of himself and falls all over the stage and hits his head off the bench. Like he's suffering, and he's, the only thoughts he has are tethered to this school, to this religion, to this small town sort of mentality, if you will. And I just said like phenomenal sort of opposite depictions of men in this situation, like through Mac and Cam's performance. And both, I think, did such a great job of playing, like you said, the very like strong, masculine man of the house versus like the little boy struggling,
Soy
drowning.
boy, as he's called many
Soy boy,
times.
multiple times by Teresa. And then this one of their final images, I think it will be baked in my brain for such a long time, of like the guns and the whiskey, like, and just again talking about our system, like I say so many times, it's like the men, especially the young men in coming up in this system, like there is a lot of pressure and external vices that contribute to this ever going cycle of patriarchy. And a lot of them are falling prey to it because of, again, the system, breaking the system that our character of Teresa talks a lot about. Which that's a good segue to Teresa, but I don't know, Ryan, if you want to jump on this image or
I guess before
Cam's
I
performance.
love everything you're saying about the image. I don't need to add to that. I will say just I feel like I was selling Kevin a little short earlier when I just briefly described him as this silly little goofy guy. But yeah, Cam's performance brings so much texture to him that honestly, yeah, I can't think of a better actor for this role. That he just really he gets the comedy, he gets the depth, he
Yeah,
gets the existential dread, and it all just kind of
absolutely.
comes together in this very pathetic but very human, and I'll say it, even sometimes lovable guy. But then he'll
Oh,
say
yeah.
something that makes you like, oh wait, I don't know if I love you. But like, but he is the character who's genuinely questioning a lot of these things. He just, and not because he's like an audience avatar for the liberals to be like, yeah, we also disagree with this. But he has these convictions, but he doesn't. What he learned in the school was that you can learn all this poetry and philosophy, but it'll always bring you to the same conclusion. And he's finally starting to question that, even if it's not actually going to break him out of those conclusions. That
Right.
education has been internalized in him, but he has this zest for questioning and knowledge and discourse that ultimately never goes anywhere. Which, okay, anyway, but yeah, great job
Yeah.
in Cam's performance of bringing that to life.
Phenomenal.
Okay, you wanted to talk about Ruth.
Yeah, let's talk about Ruth as Teresa. First of all, like hats off to, again, like we read this play and like we obviously like reading the text, you're like amazing. On the feet, I'm like, oh my gosh, right. Teresa has swaths of text and not just, dialogue, like monologues breaking down particular systems and ideologies. So like just hats off first of all for that feat accomplishment, of tackling all of that and so articulate. Like I was like chewing on every word that Ruth was saying. And for someone who hadn't read the play before this, that character very much needs to, like that actor per se, I guess, needs to map out everything that they're saying, because I think Teresa is a lot of like the bones and foundation of why this piece exists. Like her character breaks down the fourth turning, like, you know what I mean? And so just brilliant, brilliant text work there. And again, there's this character is you are made to cringe. She opens up topics and then whoever she's having the conversation with sort of finds a way to manipulate that person by continuing to talk about the topic, but also peppering in outlandish other topic in comparison or contrast, to the point where sometimes you're listening to a conversation that Teresa's having, and quite literally you're like, this is just absurdity now. Like,
How did
how are
we
you
get here
comparing?
from there? Yeah.
How do we get here to there? But it is such an indication of like sometimes how we talk as humans. I'm not even saying, I'm saying like content aside, right? Like sometimes we have these big conversations, and then the speaker and the listener at different times can realize they're going off the rails, or they're losing their stance in what's supposed to be talked about, or the debate their side. So they sort of start spiraling themselves. And instead of just agreeing to disagree or changing their opinion, they will just dig deeper and deeper and grab onto any other thing that's popping up in their mind and spew that forth as well. And I think that's very evident in Teresa. And I think Ruth did a wonderful job of doing that, when like peppering in these tendrils of, I've got to keep talking. I've got to win this conversation. So let me just keep spewing. She kind of lifted this outlandishness in such a spicy, feisty way that, like, people in the audience like guffawed or gasped, or,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. Oh, okay. I want to talk about too the costuming of the women. I will volley Ruth your way, but let's just talk about, I loved how the women were dressed in this piece. And we'll talk about Teresa first, wearing this like slim powder pink dress, like very slim fitting, with like a white tiny cardigan, and then all the way down to her shoes being nude, like the exact color of her skin tone, pretty much. Like the costume designer, again, wow. And her hair is like perfect and pinned up and everything. And it's like, this was just like a perfect embodiment of, I am a good Christian, and also the crucifix necklace. I am a good Christian woman. I have been, top of my class. I have continued peppering that into my everyday life. Again, I am a woman. I am a female. I am wearing pink. I am wearing a white like cardigan and skin tone white-ish shoes. Like it's just very, it was like really, I don't want to say like, it's certainly not clowny, but like just like the costume, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like such a wonderful physical extension of who this person is. And one of the last things that we get that Teresa says is she's worried that her wedding, she just wants her wedding to be perfect, and she has this worry about like being loved. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are dressed like a wedding cake like this whole time. Like it's almost like she's in preparation to give herself to this holy matrimony, and like, maybe if I dress like the cake, like people will notice me, or people, it just, again, it was just, again, like icing on the cake, I guess, with her costume. And we'll get into the other girls' costumes when we unpack them. But I want to toss Teresa your way, Ryan.
Yeah, completely agree about everything you say. I don't even know how much there is to add. What I like, we've seen Ruth perform many times before. She has excellent comedy chops, and she brings this just confident, playful argumentativeness to the character of Teresa. But then when we do see her breakdown at the end, I think it does show a very good swing of emotion for this character. So yeah,
Right.
again, you've taken the words out of my mouth. I don't know what to add. You want to talk about Hallie next? Hallie Celine as Emily, I think she's such an interesting character, and it's funny when they announced that Howland Company was doing this, they have their regular stable of actors, and when we read the play, I'm like, I'm pretty sure Hallie's gonna play Emily, because it just feels like such a perfect role for her. And she has this kind of like quiet demureness to her. She has this disease that makes her very humble, very sweet, appreciating her life. But she also can't be reduced to that sort of flat stereotype. I think the line that immediately sold me on Hallie's performance is the one where Kevin says to her, Teresa's just going on about cocaine and sex and war. And Hallie, as Emily says, what did she say about cocaine and sex? Like, and that, like, you kind of had this, like, bug-eyedness to her, like, the excitement of,
Yeah.
like, yeah, forget about the war. What are those things? That my life contains none of that. I'm excited to hear about it. And
Yeah.
and the fact that she has, she lives in DC. She has liberal friends. She's willing to go to bat for her positions, even if she's not the best debater, and very difficult to debate against someone like Teresa, unless you're Dr. Gina Presson, who we'll get to in a moment.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought she brought something really interesting to this character. And then, of course, there's the ending monologue, which
Yes.
I don't even know what to say about it, but just suffice to say, yeah, I've been saying, like, swings and pivots with all of these characters, but this was probably the biggest one in the
Oh, yeah.
entire show. And yeah, Hallie, to be able to manage the original version of the character that we see and then do this kind of demonic, pain-induced, just, similar to the generator sound, but in words,
Yeah.
it was remarkable. Anything you want to add?
Absolutely.
Please go first.
Yeah, I will absolutely agree with everything you said. And I also want to just add my little costume sort of visual of her. So I think, like I said, with the men kind of showing the opposite versions of manhood, I think you could see that a lot in Emily and Teresa, the opposite sort of depictions of womanhood. And with Emily, I think to me, she kind of gave off like, with her costume, like OG Taylor Swift vibes kind of thing. She has like a nice, like modest braid. She's like a feathery blue dress she's got going on, a more like rustic, cozy cardigan, and like these not blue, suede, not blue suede, just these beige suede cowboy boots. And so, again, it kind of just showing in what you had said, kind of like this meek and mild groundedness we kind of have to her, and her kind of growing up here. Like, I think that's very a good visualization of her kind of coming back to her roots. And I think you've chatted about this too, but she's kind of that character that is always like, no matter how big, grandiose the conversations get, she's always kind of wanting to tether back to like, oh, I love you all still, or like bringing it back to Christ and bringing it back to like the roots and the traditionalists, and not really wanting to shake the boat too much. But then obviously we get that final monologue, which, like you're saying, is that exact pivot, which is just amazing. And Hallie's performance of that, I just want to say, like, bow down. I thought it was excruciatingly delicious. And yeah, I had goosebumps. So that's where I'll end with that. Definitely, I mean, you're going to want to see the show, but like,
yeah,
that alone was like, oh my gosh, right. This is like a micro play within.
It is, yeah, and it is a feat for the actor.
Yeah.
Okay, one more character to go through, and then we should probably wrap up.
Of course.
Gina Presson. You want to take
Yes.
us away here?
Okay, so Dr. Gina, I'm going to start from a costume perspective, kind of how I've been doing this whole episode. She walks in like a human Star-Spangled Banner. She comes in this stark red business dress. She's got a blue blazer on top and a string of pearls. And I think, again, like, what a wonderful sort of punched picture of this character and what she represents. As we mentioned with the story, she just became president of this very conservative Catholic college. She's got her hair uptight in a bun, and she just comes in. She says a little tipsy, but like, we know this lady has been sort of probably living her ideal perfect life. And everyone, all of the heroes, the younger folks on stage, are just like foaming at the mouth to get this woman's attention. She takes Teresa to task. We find out there's a misunderstanding between what Teresa now believes, a former student of hers, and what her beliefs or what she thinks the school is doing for their students. And you just see both of these women unravel and shock each other. And to me, I just want to say before, because I know, Ryan, you have kind of similar thoughts, but I think it's a wonderful thing with this older generation character that comes in. It's a wonderful, sad sort of, again, the system portrayal of, she thinks she just released these students into the world and everything is fine and dandy. And yet, did she realize that she didn't support them. She didn't support them how the real world sort of required or needed them to. And it just brings me back to like, do you care? Do you actually care? Or are you so embedded in your own beliefs and your traditions? And that is the way. And I'll say it, that is the way, that is the Lord.
The character is interesting because she seems to represent this idea of like a classical conservatism that she's the character who most openly disdains Trump and everything that the Republican Party has become, even though it is just furthering the same agendas that she supported when she supported Pat Buchanan or Barry Goldwater, as we're told in previous. It's just a cruder version of that. She calls it chemotherapy that's going to wipe out the disease of liberalism and helpfully recharge their politics. But she's like, I failed you, Teresa, because you've been swept up in the culture war business. And I see this character as just like such an interesting, she never really makes a good argument in defense of her views. She usually just like throws it or changes. She's like a rhetorical master that you might not even notice that she's doing it. But she's just not going to take responsibility for what her party and like-minded conservatives have become because she doesn't like it. It's not polite. It's disgusting to her, but at the same time, it is ultimately the same beliefs as Teresa tries to show her, but she's, for all of her argumentative skills, just isn't able to compete toe-to-toe with her old mentor. So to just like throw in the air, like, I have failed, you have not become what I want. Like, there's a moment for self-examination there that Gina certainly isn't going to seize, but realize that, oh, maybe we have all failed collectively to, put forward the type of political conservatism that we think is proper, and not realizing that, Trump is not the disease, he's the symptom of a lot of everything that has been building up here. To just, get back to Maria's performance in particular, she really just brings this sternness. She plays the tipsy well, I think, without letting it overpower the character. She is confident talking about all of these things and is willing to kind of go toe to toe, similar to Mac as Justin. She brings a softness to it every time she talks to Kevin. There's this kind of like real maternal energy that she definitely does not provide to Emily, which is also interesting in the performance here. But again, she, everyone is so good in their roles here. And to the costume point that you made, I guess I completely agree. The Star Spangled Banner, chef's kiss, brilliant. But we're also told very briefly after she exits the stage by Emily that she survived breast cancer. And this blue blazer that kind of protrudes out like in the chest area, that's actually, I feel like, probably a deliberate costume choice or something that would maybe cover like up that area that might be vulnerable or possibly have been amputated or, dealt with any surgery. So I really see like there's a lot of, not just the aesthetic vibe of what this costume conveys, but almost like practical choices of what someone who's lived the life of this character would decide to wear, and and how it's maybe covering or compensating for something, a failure of womanhood as she might even see it, like in her kind of worldview that needs to be filled, a gap that needs to be filled in a way.
Well, and the choice of the dress being red and then a blue, like a blue blazer over top, and those colors sort of red versus blue, the different party colors too, right? Like, not to say like, oh, great, now she's a Democrat, but like,
definitely not.
What does it mean, right? To add like that's the color that's added on top of the red, maybe more pungent Republican dress.
It's kind of this sort of cloak that goes over top that, yes, I am a Republican through and through, but I'm more nuanced in my opinions. Can't you see that I'm sporting both colors?
Yeah.
Okay. Any last thoughts you want to? We're doing this. Let's
just like this. I just want to say to the set, like, this is the second time I've seen a very intense piece in the studio at Crows, which is their smaller sort of backspace studio, and quite literally any piece you see in there, like it's kind of on your lap. It's unavoidable. You are along for the ride. And the last thing I saw was the last sort of intense and grotesque piece I saw there was Punk Rock, which Howland did several years ago. And that show also had gunshots and massive themes and breakdown of characters and bodily fluids. So again, I love this space. I love the studio. And I think it was, again, the set dressing was phenomenal. There was like mock wood chips that was like tethered around the space. There was like a back shed that kind of looked like you're sort of traditional red middle American barn. They had sort of the exit and entrance to the theater space being exit and entrance to the house. And as you're sort of walking into the theater, it's like you are walking into these people's lives.
Mhm.
I just thought it was a wonderful manipulation of the space. So yeah, hats off to set and the direction and playground of the actors within that space.
Yeah, agreed. And just like one thing that's, I guess, a complication of the space is that the seats really wrap around in all kinds of angles. There's like this one random seat that's like right next to the barn that we have yeah, on the stage left side, I think. And, you really do have to think about sight lines with this space, that it's not just like a straightforward proscenium or even just a wraparound semi thrust. And yeah, like, and the intimacy of this piece, like it would have gotten swallowed in like the larger Goulian theater that they have at Crow's, that I think, yeah, you want it a small space like this
For sure.
that will really just make you feel claustrophobic and absorbed into it. I'm sure claustrophobic.
We're all sitting around, it's sitting around telling camp stories.
Kind of, yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, we're just in the backyard with these characters, living their lives with them, getting maybe a little too close for comfort.
Yeah, exactly. So, as stated, this piece is happening at the Studio Theater. It is a co-production with Crow's and Howland Company, directed by the incredible Phil Akin, assistant directed by the astonishing Stephen Howe, and the illustrious cast that we mentioned really does get us in the text. And you are, like I said, there's no intermission, so you are along for the ride through and through. This piece is happening until October 29th. And there is, like I said, little tickets remaining. So really jump on this if you, want to expose yourself to this thinker. Any final concluding
I think
thoughts
we
for
can
you, Ryan?
leave it at that. I'm fine with what we've covered. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So as usual, stay safe, stay healthy, friends, and expose yourself to the phenomenal art we've got going on in this city and around the country.
Yeah.
Cheers to that. We'll
Cheers
see
to
you
that.
next episode, folks.
Doobly doo.
Do believe.